I forgot to mention a few others for the local congregation, some that the elders would like for the congregation to be mindful of on a regular basis. Of course, Briley Hall, who has gone into the military. Also, Andrew Smith, who is currently in Japan. Please do not forget these two and the challenging environment that they are in. Also, continue to remember some of our members who we don't see as often as we wish we could. So I make you mindful of Sarah Hill, also Betsy and Richard Thompson Smith. Please do not give up on these people.
Amen.
If you are out wandering, lost on the mountainside, think of it that way. Would you want people to forget you? And also the work in Tanzania. Just got a new report, August report. There's 3 of them copied up and stapled to the bottom of the map in the back. Those, if you want to take it home and read it in the convenience of your home, please do so. So it's not that you got to stand there and read it. That's why there's 3 copies. Just take with you and just bring back and stick back there. God is good, isn't he?
Amen.
God is great. I appreciate you encouraging me in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. What we just did was an amazing time together. I appreciate that. Every aspect of worship that God has designed for us to follow. Even as a mere man, I see his wisdom in it. And it is good to be together.
Amen.
We're going to talk about something called humility. And if you can see here, that's a racetrack. And I hope you got your running shoes on this morning because you know my lessons, they're long. And if I'm going to finish them, you've got to have your Nikes on. Because we have got to move fast if we can get through this whole lesson. But have no fear. If I don't, there's outlines in the back on the table there. Please take it with you. So whenever I don't finish, I know that you're going to be eager and excited to work on this week when you have some free time. Practicing humility, studying the concepts of surrendering and giving it all up. It is not easy to do. We all know that beginning in the teachings of Jesus was very clear in his message. He wants all mankind to come to him. And he wants all to come who labor and are heavy laden. So what I learned here right off is no human is going to live a life that's not going to have challenges. No human's going to live a life where there are not any burdens. There are no things to weigh you down. Now, some may have more than others. We can agree on that. But if you're human, there are challenges and difficulties in life. And Jesus, speaking to humanity as a whole, says, I want you to come to me. Why should I come to Jesus when I'm laboring and I'm heavy laden? He says, because I'm the one who can give you the rest that you need. And in that, I want to pull forth a phrase that we're going to build on. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And I like the expression he says that follows. What does he want me to learn about Christ? You know, I think about Christ, he's the king. He has all power, right? He's so pure and righteous, and he's just glorious and beautiful. Oh, that's what I want to be. I want to be the big boss. I want to delegate to everybody else what to do. I'm not going to be that lowly peon servant that some other people in life have to be. But you, who are good Bible readers, I know you are, you know that that's not the case. Jesus, though he was king, we can learn something from this king. This is a unique king because he says, I am gentle. He is a gentle king, and he is a lowly in heart king. And he says, when you come to me as king or Lord of your life, what you will find rest for your souls because I am gentle and I am lowly in heart and I can give that to you. So we're going to look at that this morning, the idea that the learning from Jesus, the gentle and lowly in heart. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 24 through 25, Jesus says, if anyone wants to come after me, let him deny himself. So denying Christ has something to do with gentleness and lowly in heart. And we're going to look at a passage in just a minute that's going to tell you very clearly that this is exactly what Jesus did. Jesus doesn't ask you to do anything that he himself would not do. Jesus asked us to deny self. Well, did Jesus ever deny himself? Deny self, take up the cross, and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Philippians chapter 2, we're studying this actually on Sunday mornings, and I hope you won't rush off, that you can join the adult Bible class. A really good class that we've got going there, and not because I'm teaching it, but because we have so many great people in this audience that teach me. They have lots of good comments. And we're going to start today in Philippians chapter 3. But in Philippians chapter 2, we've already studied this in our class. If you pick up the reading of verse 3, he says, I urge you, true companion. That's chapter 4. That's wrong. Chapter 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition. Remember, we deny self. Oh, selfish ambitions? Surely Christians would never do something of selfish ambition. Well, if they didn't, or they wouldn't, why does Jesus writing to the Christians say, watch out for selfish ambition? I think because he knows we have that tendency to be self-centered. So we need to deny ourselves. So let nothing be done through selfish ambition nor conceit, but in lowliness of... did we just read a term, something about being lowly in mind? He says, in lowliness of mind, right, esteem others better than yourself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but for the interests of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Jesus. And we don't need to read the rest because I know you can fill it in. And so in Jesus, looking at Jesus, let this mind be in you that was in him. What terms do we usually think about? We talk about the humility of Jesus, right? That Jesus, even though he was God, he emptied himself and he came in the form of what? Form of a servant. So here you have this idea that Jesus is the example for us. He's not going to ask us to do something that he himself has not done. So what we're talking about today really is the idea of total surrender. We want to grip those fists and say, I'm strong and I'm going to lead and I know what's right and I'm going to, it's all about me. And we rally together. A lot of times a bunch of Christians get together and they're just going to ram Christ through the world with no gentleness, with no lowliness of mind. Why is it that sometimes Christians have the worst reputations in town? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, aren't there people who are trying to live righteous? Why do people not like Christians? Well, maybe it's because they could see through that we really are not totally surrendering our lives to Jesus. See, sometimes others see us better than we can see ourselves. So when we talk about surrendering to Jesus, being humble or lowly of mind, we're talking about we got to quit resisting. Now, people that know me, I'm going to say something about myself here today. We're going to be talking about something, and you could say something, and I mean you could read it on me, right? Boy, the shield goes up. Ooh, you said what? Ooh. And the shield goes up, and what I'm resisting, right? Oh no, I'm not going to listen to what you're saying, because what you're saying is wrong. There's no way what you think is right, because I know it's right. So being a Christian means someone who surrenders total. So that means we don't throw up that sheet. We're willing to surrender, right? Cease to resist. But when we cease to resist, why do we cease to resist? Not to be run over, okay? So don't think that's what I'm saying. I'm ceasing to resist. I'm denying self because I'm going to yield the power and control over my life to somebody else. I'm not going to be the one who's going to say what I think. I'm going to let Jesus say what he thinks. Right? So I'm going to give in, one might say. You're giving in, Terrell? You're giving up? Well, I'm giving in. I'm giving up to let Christ have control over me. Is that biblical? Can you think of somebody who wrote in the book of Galatians? It's not I who live, but who? Christ liveth in me. And that's exactly what we're talking about this morning. The idea of totally surrendering, giving oneself up completely to Jesus Christ. And I'm going to use myself a lot this morning as an example. This is something that I said I'd done my whole life, but in reality, as I looking back, I haven't really done this that much. I mean, giving oneself up completely to Jesus. Oh, we're so easy to criticize our denominational friends when they're not doing some things right. Well, how well are we doing with this topic, folks? I don't know. Oh, there you go. Total surrender. You know those passages. We won't read it. There's lots of them in there, right? About submitting or humbling or no longer being the man in charge. In James chapter 4, verse 7, submit yourselves therefore to God. James 4, verse 10, humble yourself before the Lord, and he will exalt you. We just sang this song. Galatians chapter 2, as we made reference, Paul says, it is no longer I who lives, but Christ who lives in me. Matthew 6, a result of that type of attitude, when you submit yourselves and you humble yourselves, and it's no longer you who are living, you know what you're doing? Your life will become a life where you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's easy to do, Matthew 6. And 1 Peter 5 is easy to do when you do James 4, 7 and 7 and 10, and Galatians chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. How well are you doing on that one? What about your anxiety? Something you're worried about? Something you're kind of anxious about? Something you just throw your hands out, Lord, I don't know what I'm going to do with this thing. It's way too big to me. He says, cast all your anxiety. Doesn't matter what your anxiety is. Doesn't matter what you're worrying about. Doesn't matter what you're concerned about. He says, you give it to me. And that's what we don't do. We hold on to it. And I rethink it, and I rethink it, and I try to fix it, and I go to you and say, can you fix it? And why don't we turn to the one who can fix things, who works in ways that we may not understand, who has all power? We don't. I have submitted, right? What little power I've got, I've dumped it at the feet of Jesus. Casting all your anxieties on him. Why? Because he truly cares. You know, sometimes I feel like other people don't care about you. Don't care about your worries. Don't care about your problems. Nobody has. I got this burden all by myself. Well, it's sad if your brethren can't give you any type of solace and comfort to let you know that they care about you. But the reality is, Jesus says, I'm the one who cares about you. This thing's slow. So what hinders humility? What keeps me from humbling myself? What keeps me from seeing myself as I am? What keeps me from truly emptying myself and denying self? And it's basically the word self. But we add an emotion with that self. It's pride. There's different definitions or different descriptions. Pride or being proud. You're prideful. You're arrogant. You're self-centered. I mean, there's all kinds of words or description of what this is all about. But that's really the way it is. I'm sitting here, and I know what's right, and you're not telling me anything, right? My feelings have been hurt. You did this to me, and I'm sitting here until you do what I deem is good enough. What's that about? It's all about me. It's about me and my feelings and my emotions. Self is such a problem. That's why he says, if you want to follow me, what's the first thing we do? We deny ourselves. I'm denying myself, and that means I'm denying my emotions and my feelings and my hurt feelings. Those do not rule my life anymore. Oh, yes, I may have those feelings, but I get rid of them. I'm not going to let that be what rules my life. Scripture about pride. So in other words, to talk about emptying ourselves of our humility, unfortunately, you got to go the other extreme. So just real quickly, and this isn't a lesson on pride, but just to show you that God doesn't like it, folks. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 13, to fear the Lord is to hate evil. And what does God say? I hate pride, and I hate arrogance. And he also hates evil behavior. But you know what? Because with pride, evil behavior comes. With arrogance, evil behavior is the result. And often perverse speech. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 5. The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. James chapter 4, verse 6, therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, for all that's in the world, what's in the world, okay? If you want to do a test, if you've emptied yourself of the world, or you've forsaken the world, or denied the world, then just turn to this passage. He says, this is what the world's about. The world's about the desire of the flesh. And so this verse was written to me. So God is saying, Terrell, if you're still living by the desires of your own flesh, and that's what's running you and leading you and steering you, both physically, emotionally, and mentally, he says you're of the world. Oh yeah, you've been baptized for the remission of sins, but you're still in the world. The pride of life, right? The desires of the eye, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life. He says, let me get something straight. This is not from God. You can claim to be from God. You can be claiming to follow God. I can be claiming to follow God. But if I'm living this way, he says, Terrell, don't fool yourself. So how could we live this way and with feeling good about our spirituality? Pride. In Mark chapter 7, verse 20 through 21, God says, I'll tell you where this is all coming from. If you suffer with pride, if I suffer with pride, if I got a little bit of arrogance, let me tell you where it's coming from. It's not coming from somebody else. But sometimes we want to justify our behavior because of somebody else, right? Well, it's because of them that I'm the way that I am. God never goes there. Because he says you're in control of yourself, your own thoughts, your own feelings, and so am I. He says whatever comes out of a mind defiles the man. So it's not something that somebody else did that ruined me. It's something from inside of me. Something's inside of me that's not right, and that's what causes me to behave the way that I am. He says from what was within, out of the heart, and he says, let me tell you what I'm talking about. It's not your stomach. It's not your big toe. It's not your big thumb. It is your heart. Your heart's the problem. Out of the heart comes what? And he has a list. And actually the list could be longer, but I think we get his point. He says evil thoughts, adulteries, fornication, and murders. Those are horrible things. We never want those to be named among the people of God, but those things happen, and they are real because we're human, right? And if anybody has done any of those things, it's because the heart was struggling. The heart was not right at that moment. He goes on to talk about thefts and covetousness and wickedness and deceit and lewdness and evil eye and blasphemy. And you say, oh, don't worry, Tara, I've never done any of those things. But then he sneaks in that little 5-letter word that I struggle with. Pride. Why did you put pride along with murderers and adulterers? Come on now, God. Don't you demand that out of me. Pride. And I think it's probably my pride that's trying to rationalize with God to tell him to convince to take that thing out of the list. Right? Foolishness. All these evil, and he calls it evil, folks. Evil things come from within. Pride is just as evil as adultery. Pride is just as evil as stealing. Pride is just as evil as lewdness. And they all defile us. So, what does it mean to be proud? Well, we're going to look at that a little bit today. But I'm going to look at it in the sense of looking at what humility will lead us to do. You may be asking, well, Terrell, I don't think I'm a proud person. And this slide's for me because probably if you'd asked me before I did this lesson, do you consider yourself kind of a proud person? I said, oh, no. I've lived a life busy of helping others and serving others and sacrificing for others, and which is, ask anybody who knows me, I think that's a fair representation of who I am. But you know what? I struggle with it. Pride's an issue for me too. It's not just an issue for you. I think it's an issue really for all of us to a certain degree. And we shouldn't be surprised because we come into this world being a little baby who's dependent upon everybody else, and we scream and we holler, and guess what everybody does? Everybody runs to my needs. And they give me my needs. So we are trained to be self-centered, arrogant little people. That's what we are. So remember that, parents, as you run every time the baby squalls. So, let's look at a few thoughts before I jump into humility. And notice I said you might be proud. So I'm not saying you are. And I'm not saying if you ever think these things that we're going to look at necessarily means you are a proud person. But it indicates something. If you think that you've earned what you've got, for a Christian now, if you think what you have, you earned, I've earned every bit of it. What are you doing? You're leaving God out of the picture. God gave you life. God let the sun come up. God let the rain come. God gave you the employer that you've got, no matter how much or how little. It's all, God's in control, folks. Amen. So if I think I've earned this, and I earned something from myself or from somebody else, you got to pride. Your pride is starting to build. If you think your way's the only way, my way is the only right way. No, you can't do that any other way. If you think you know better than God, have you met somebody who thinks they know better than God? Well, I know God said that, but I don't think he really means that. I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. Well, that's thinking more of themselves than they are of God. If you think that you're in control. Now, this is I'll beat myself up on this one. And it just shows you don't see yourself for who you are. I've never looked at myself as a person who is in control or has a control issue. But I've had numerous people tell me, Terrell, you just have to be in control, don't you? It's hard to see ourselves. Maybe I do have a little bit of pride. If you think you don't need to change, it's just all the other people who's not to change. I'm a pretty good person. You need to be preaching to those other people, Terrell, not me. If you can't say you're sorry, that's an arrogant person, a proud person. If you think other people don't respect you enough, they don't respect me enough here. If you all knew what I did as the preacher and an elder, I did that, blah, 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 blah. You need to be making me. Where's my meal list? I didn't realize it wasn't up there. If you don't respect me enough, if resent when that's not the right word. What? Resent. Thank you very much. Joe is my interpreter. Not supposed to speak in tongues unless there's an interpreter. He's my interpreter. If you resent when things are not perfect in your life, demanding, why isn't everything perfect in my life? And I tell you what, none of us have perfect lives. We don't. Even the best of us just are able to keep it hidden a little bit better. It really is. If you're jealous when somebody else gets the attention, and if you're angry when you don't get the credit. That's just a few. I mean, you can Google this. You can go to some, brain site, and they'll tell you all about what it means to be proud. That's where some of these things came from. I'm really not that smart, so I lean a lot on other people's brains, and so I will give them credit. If we struggle, if we have these types of thoughts, maybe we're a little bit proud. So, pride shows itself when? When will I, Terrell Bunting, have the tendency to be a little arrogant, a little proud? It's because when I focus on myself and think that, I'm pretty great. I'm pretty good. All the rest of you out there, I know you've got lots of struggles, but I've mastered all those things, and I'm up on this different level. You're still down there, but I'm up on this level. I'm pretty good. Turn, if you will, to Romans chapter 12, verse 3, and let's see what God has to say. In Romans chapter 12, verse 3, he says, "For I say, through the grace given to me," notice, Paul says, I want you to, first of all, not look at me. I want you to focus on the grace that God gives me. See, totally different perspective. Not, look how great I am, the Apostle Paul. "For I say to you, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but think soberly, as God has dealt to each a measure of faith." Paul could have said, look how great I am. In fact, if you stayed to this morning's Sunday morning Bible class, the adult class in the auditorium, we're going to look at that. Paul refers to a time when he thought he was pretty good. I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews. Oh, look at my background. Look at my heritage. Look what I've accomplished. Whoa, look at me. I was a Pharisee of Pharisees. Do you ever run across that in the Lord's church today? Oh, surely not. Well, maybe you didn't meet me. I can be pretty proud about my heritage. And it's in a spiritual sense, just like Paul. Have you met the Bunting family? Do you know all the Buntings that preach? Do you know, what's that? That's arrogance, folks. We got to get rid of it. Have you met Jesus Christ? Have you met Jesus Christ? And I just want you to know, when Jesus Christ influences your family's wonderful. Leave it at that. Leave it at that. No, don't look at us, look at me. That's self-focused. I am so great, I am so righteous, I do so many things right, and you don't. That's self-focused. Well, let's look at another passage. Matthew chapter 7, verse 3. Matthew 7, verse 3 is when we start comparing ourselves to one another. And Jesus addressed this multiple times. And it's interesting that sometimes the one who wanted to compare themselves to others the most were the very serious religious people of Jesus' day. The most conservative Jews were constantly doing that. But here in Matthew 7, verse 3, He says, oh, why do you look at the speck that's in your brother's eye? No, see that? Ah, I see the speck on you, Jack. I see the speck in Jack's eye. Boy, and I'm going to hammer it. I'm going to let him have it because I see his speck. And God says, Terrell, quit looking for the specks in other people's eyes. What does he want me to do? He says, first, he says, consider the plank that's in yours. Isn't it interesting that we like to compare ourselves with people that are worse than we are? Whether it be worse off, spiritually, monetarily, intellectually, whatever way it is. And why do we want to compare ourselves to somebody that's less than we are? Because that makes me look really good. But if God undressed me, symbolically, in front of you, I wouldn't look so good. How good would you look if God undressed you and we could really see whether there's specks or there's beams in your eye? So he says, first, do you not consider the planks that's in your own eye, verse 3? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, the plank is in your own? See, so God says, don't do that. Quit comparing yourself. Is there any passage in the Bible that tells you who you're supposed to compare yourself with? I think it's in there. I do believe it's in there. Is it the book of Ephesians? I think it's Ephesians. He says, you talk about growing up into the full measure of who? Brother so-and-so. I mean, he's really a good Christian, isn't he? Old brother old brother so-and-so's name's not in there. He says, I want you to grow up to the full stature of Jesus Christ. Compare yourself. If you're going to compare yourself to anybody, compare yourself to Jesus Christ. That's why I love those bracelets that came out, I don't know, ages ago. I was a young man when they came out. What would Jesus do? Oh, and I remember the church, they talked about all those horrible bracelets, because you're kind of weird. Just because we didn't do it, is that why it was wrong? I thought it was great. I like being reminded about, okay, Terrell, I'm trying to make a decision. Oh, yeah, what would Jesus do in this case? That's a smart thing for us to do. Maybe you don't need the bracelet, okay? Glory to you if you don't need it. I needed the bracelet. I needed the sign on the wall to remind me of what I'm supposed to be, that I'm not as good as I think I am. And another thing is we think of self as the exemption. Oh, but, I'm different. Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, those people at church, I don't expect any more out of them because, you know who they are. And you might say, was that in the Bible? Oh, yeah. And probably the one that we want to pick on the most that had this tendency was Peter. If you look at Matthew chapter 26, Jesus is getting ready to die, right? And he says, you know what? You're all of you. So it's like if he's talking to us today, and I'd be sitting there with you. Jesus was up here. He says, you know what? You're all gonna deny me. You're all gonna run. Oh no, Jesus, I'm strong. Oh, I don't make mistakes like that. That's how our mind would think, right? These are men who had been with Jesus for 3 years, folks. You may like your preacher, you may not like your preacher. But anyway, let's say you like your preacher, and he does a great job, and he's taught you so well. But don't you think there's a difference between a human preacher teaching you and the Son of God? I think there would be a major difference. And so these are 12 men who got to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to his message, right? And he says, you know what? I already know what's going to happen. You're all in the same boat. None of you are better than the other one. That's basically what he's saying. That's me paraphrasing. He says, you know what? You're all going to deny me. Guess who said, oh, no, Lord, you're mistaken. Yeah, everybody else is. Not me. Not me. You just don't know me, Jesus. And Peter did. Read that passage. Lord, they all will, but not me. Because you know what? I'm different. I got a stronger faith. I got a stronger personality. You get the problem with the pride? What word's in there every time I said something? I. Pride shows itself. When we are self-focused, we compare ourselves with others, and we think we are the exception. So now comes the lesson, which I can see already looking inside. I'm not going to finish. So plan on picking up an outline, or you're going to hear the rest of it next week, and you probably want to hear something else next week, okay? Practicing humility. Humility does not come natural, folks. I want you to understand that. It's just not going to. Yes, some people are a little bit more docile. And they come across as humble, but being docile does not mean being humble. Humility is learning to think less of self, and of yourself less. Try to get up one day and don't think about yourself at all. Good luck, that's all I got to say. Well, I got to shave. Well, I got to look good, you know. I got to lose weight. I've got to change my eating. I've got to go to work, and I don't like that person. I wish God would get rid of that person because they just are a pain in my you-know-what. And I just want, that's all about me. Try to get up a day and try that. Think less of yourself, but also think of yourself less. Both of those things are major problems that I struggle with. Jesus, remember, pulling back to Philippians, I'll pull up all these passages, sorry. Nope, that's too many. Philippians chapter 2, we read that, right? Jesus humbled himself, he emptied himself, he came in the form of a servant or the form of a slave, okay? For the kids in the audience, okay? You kids, you with me? I know you're about to go to sleep. Matthew 18. Matthew 18. I didn't have time to get a bunch of props, but... Now, if you saw me playing with this, you'd think, Terrell, that's just silly. You're a soon-to-be 65-year-old man, and you're playing with Mr. Potato Head. I think you're a little, I hate to say it, you're a little messed up in the mind because that's childish, right? So this is my thought for childishness, okay? Do you remember anywhere in the Bible where Jesus said being childish is a good thing? Matthew 18. In fact, he says, I've got to be one that wants to play with Mr. Potato Head if I want to go to heaven. He says, because the kingdom of heaven is filled with little children. Right? That's me paraphrasing. He calls to himself all the people around him. The disciples are trying to keep the kids away. Keep those kids away. They're just obnoxious. They're no fun, right? Is that right? I'm too busy. I don't have time for you. Jesus says, come here, little child. Should have been on a stool, and if I was real theatrical, I'd ask one of the kids to come up, but some of you may have a problem with that. But anyway, just imagine it. Put that little child on my knee and say, this is what you and I got to become. Because that's what Jesus taught. That's not Terrell speaking, that's God speaking. He says, unless you become like a little child, you'll in no way enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, what's he getting? What do you think about when you think about children? You think about their innocence, and you think about their humility, their humbleness, their total dependence. And that should be us in our relationship with God. Luke 14, he talks about those who don't do that, right? But John 13, we've got another illustration about Jesus, and that's a towel. Jesus didn't go to the local swimming pool, I promise you. So that's not in there in the Bible. He may have, but it's not revealed. So if you think about Jesus and a towel, where does your mind go? I hope it goes to John chapter 13, right? Where Jesus takes out his outer clothes off and he gets down on his knees and he washes what? He washes the disciples' feet is what he does, right? He washes the disciples' feet, and then what does he say after? He says, I want you to go do the same thing. What did Peter say? Oh, no, Jesus, you're not going to wash my feet. There's that guy again who also said earlier, I'll never do that. I'll never despise you. So you see, Jesus is this example. So these are some things, and we'll see how far we get. And I'm going to run through these a lot quicker, okay? And I want you to go home and read the passages. Number one, practicing humility. First thing you can start doing is start praying for somebody besides yourself, okay? But I'm going to add a little more difficult thing. Pray for somebody that you don't like. Do that one. That cantankerous neighbor. I've heard people say this. Well, they deserved what they got. And you can fill in the bank what they say. They deserve cancer, their house was burnt down, whatever it is. Some catastrophe, some horrible thing is going on in that person's life. And you say, you know what? I'm not praying for them. But you would if it was your kids, right? Oh, boy, you wouldn't stop praying. Pray for somebody. And you may say, Terry, well, where's any examples of that? Well, you can go back to the Old Testament, and it's all the way through the New Testament, right? Abraham interceded for Sodom and Gomorrah. God said, he sent to Abraham, he says, you know what, I'm going to destroy those people. Destroy them all. And Abraham said, oh, no, God, please, 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 let me pray. He prayed to God, right? He prayed to God, he prayed for Sodom and Gomorrah, and God says, no, I'm going to get rid of them. Those awful, wicked people, they don't deserve to live any longer. How many of us say that today about our neighbors or our country? We got a thing to learn about, folks. See, that's because it's my inconvenience. That's because I don't like looking at the evil. But did you thought that there might be somebody among those evil that God will save? And you remember the story, right? 50? No. 40? No. Went all the way down to 10? God says, okay, I will. Isn't that amazing? So that tells me something about Abraham. It tells me something about God. God really doesn't want bad things to happen. Even to those horrible, wicked people. And then Moses attempts to intercede for Israel. He's up there on the mountain getting the tables of stone, and they're down there partying and drinking and worshiping idols. And God says, I'm done with them. I'm done with them. Moses he intercedes. He prays. Dear Lord, please, please, don't do this. Don't do this. See? Isn't it interesting? Abraham wasn't concerned about his own welfare. Moses wasn't concerned about his own welfare. They were concerned about the welfare of others who didn't deserve it. Do you know somebody else that did that? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus wasn't thinking about himself. I don't think he ever did. This kind of prayer demands boldness and humility. We're taught not to cease to pray. In fact, I think it says God wants all men everywhere to pray with lifted hands, right? Try praying for somebody for a while. The next thing we want to do is, consider the other side. We all tend to think that we're right. Our thoughts and our opinions and our plans and our ways and our conclusions, they're the right ones. They're tried and fixed, and we've been doing them for 100 years. They got to be right because we've been doing them that long. You know what that often leads to? Spiritual arrogance and pride. There are people in the Bible who are quite smart, right? And if they had that same attitude that we sometimes have, guess what? They would have never embraced Jesus. We go to Apollos. What do you know about Apollos? Apollos wasn't a dummy. He's from the city of Alexandria. Go back and study your history. Alexandria was an impressive city. At one time, they had the world's largest library. Well, way up there as far as developments as the people, the Egyptians, right? So that's where Apollos was. He was from Alexandria. I don't know if he was Egyptian or not, or a Jew living there, but anyway, that's who he was. And he says, not only did he live in this wonderful place, he moved to Ephesus, and what does God tell you? He was an eloquent man. And not only was he eloquent, but he knew the way of Jesus. Right? What if Apollos said, you know what? I don't need you, Aquila and Priscilla, telling me anything. Come on. Did you study at the Library of Alexandria? I don't know if you did or not, but it'd be easy to say, well, do you think that you have something for me to not say? No, Apollos was willing to listen. And he embraced that which is truthful. But it's because he had an open mind. You can go to the Old Testament to King Rehoboam. Remember young King Rehoboam? David's dead, and they're fighting over who's going to be the north and the south. And you got all that stuff going on in history. But King Rehoboam said, well, I'm going to know what I'm going to seek advice. So he calls in the older guys. Okay, what do you older guys think? And they tell him what they think. What do you younger guys think? Well, he liked what the young guy said. Yeah, I like what those young guys are saying. I'm going to follow what they say. Guess what that would turn to? Consider the other side, folks, when you're trying to deal with something. We don't always have the right answer ourselves. Do a good deed secretly. Oh, it's nice to be praised, isn't it? But being praised can be a problem. And I'm not saying never praise anybody here because that potentially can lead to a problem. So please do recognize. And I do believe in recognizing the good of other people. I really do. Because I want to encourage you to continue doing that. It's a wonderful thing. There's a lot of churches that don't, just so you know. We can easily get addicted to being noticed, and we can learn how to play the crowd. Humility will demand a totally different path. Secret service. Raise your little boy saying, say, I want to go in the secret service. I say, oh, don't worry about that. If you follow Christ, being in the work of Christ is all about the secret service. Well, what do you mean, Jesus? Secret service. Well, let's go to the teachings of Jesus. Matthew chapter 6, 1 through 4, and verse 17. He says, don't let this hand know what this hand's doing, right? Don't let, why? What's he saying? Don't know what you do? Just keep it in secret, right? Do your good deeds in secret. And what does he say? He says, knowing the reality that the Lord sees it. And the Lord will reward you. I mean, your praise is a nice reward. But if I have to pick, and I don't mean this in a mean way, if I have to pick, I'd much rather get his recognition than yours. Secret deeds are challenging because they require faith, right? A faith that sees God and a faith that believes that God will reward me. But you can enjoy the praise of men. It's okay. Just don't let it lead to pride or arrogance. A refusal to complain. Whining and complaining is, I believe, a national pastime of us Americans now. I mean, you just talk any topic. We can complain about church. We can complain about everybody that's in the church building. We can complain about the politics and everybody that's in government, local government, state government. We can complain about the boss. We can complain about our spouse. We can complain. I mean, you just name it. We're just complaining, right? Complain about the weather, right? I mean, we complain. If you really stop and think of it, we complain all the time. And I think I'm a positive guy. Why are you complaining all the time? God tells us to stop the complaining in Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 through 15. Let's read that one. I don't think it's important to read, because I can't quote that one off word verbatim. But this idea of complaining, let us do good, right? The Bible tells us to do good. But we don't do it to be seen of men, right? The left hand does, the right hand doesn't know what it's doing. But here in chapter 2, verse 14, he says, and do all things without what? Without complaining or disputing, that you may be blameless and harmless children of God. Do you know what? I guess I may not be a child of God after all. Did you see what he just said? He says, do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may be a blameless and harmless child of God. Oh, well, I don't steal. That list we read earlier. Fornicator, adulterers, thieves, covetousness, and then pride was in there, but not anything else. Well, the list is actually longer if you turn to another passage. I thought those were the things, and as long as I mastered those things, then I'm good with God. He says, Terrell, if you're complaining, and this is something that only you can answer for yourself. I cannot answer for anybody else here, because I don't follow you around 7 days a week, 24/7. But just think about last week. Did you complain about anything last week? Okay, maybe you did pretty good. Well, the week before then. And did you get any argument with somebody? God says, my people do not complain, and they do not dispute. And that's when they become blameless and harmless children of God. So if I'm complaining and I'm disputing, then I'm not a harmless child of God. I guess that means I'm a dangerous child of God. I'm a violent child of God. Not violence in the normal sense, not beating somebody out. There's not a violent bone in my body. People who know me. As a kid, I couldn't even kill a fly or an ant. So no, I wasn't interested in inflicting harm on any creature or any human being. But God says there's different ways to do it. When we stop complaining and arguing, we shine as lights. And that's what he talks about here. So that you may shine as light. So if I'm complaining, there goes my light out. And in fact, even he talks about when you're doing good things. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 9. He wants us to be hospitable. We got to be nice. Well, hospitality is not just to the people we like. That's what we normally do. Well, I like everybody at church. I want everybody to come to my house next Sunday after potluck, after the service to the potluck. No, you can be my enemy and I'll invite you too. If you want it, you need food, come to my house, please. We got plenty of it, I'm sure. I'm supposed to show hospitality, but boy, I get off here inside this buddy that I got over here. I hate those potlucks. You know what those potlucks? I gotta wash my garage out. I gotta set up all those tables. I gotta put them down. And I start on Saturday, and I'm busy all the way to Sunday night. And I don't mean to jest too much, but it's fun to laugh about it. But the truth is the truth. I've got to make sure I don't complain. Let's be people who refuse to complain. And be nice to somebody that doesn't deserve it. This will be a last point. So you got to study 6, 7, and 8 on your own. And those are my favorite ones. But be nice to somebody that's undeserving. Some people don't deserve kindness, do they? I mean, we know them. You've met them. And maybe it's because we have a long history with these people. Because they're mean-spirited, they're unpleasant, and and when we meet such people, what does our mind want to say? I'll treat them the way they treat me. They'll learn a lesson. I've been there. I have had those thoughts. I struggle a little bit more with carrying it through, but I have broken through occasionally and dished back what I just got. God didn't like that. Again, Jesus is an example. When he was reviled, he reviled back, didn't he? And when he was struck, he struck back. He didn't do that. Reviled? Nope. Cursed? He was cursed? Nope, he didn't curse. You know all those passages in Matthew where Jesus says, this bad thing happens, you do something good. Bad thing happens, you do something good. How many times I got to do that, Lord? Guess what? You got to do it your whole life. That's the answer to it. Because you have surrendered to Jesus, and that's what Jesus does. We got to be people. This is my problem. I got to break that spell, not break somebody else. I got to break this spell. I'm going to be nice to that undeserving person. What does it say about fire? Just throw lots of fire at them. Just burn them up. Well, give them a cup of cold water. I mean, you know these principles. I know you know the Bible. You study it. Open your eyes and see this is what you need to start doing. And I guarantee when you start living the humble life that God has asked us to live, your life will get a lot better. Notice I didn't say perfect. It'll be a lot better. 1 Samuel chapter 10 and 11 and 15, you can read about Saul, the first king. Saul, the first king, he was known as the warrior king. Big, strong guy. Went out and fought battles, and he brought these people that have been captured. Not enemies. They are now captives. Thank you. Prisoners. That's the other word. Bringing all these prisoners back home. And here comes a bunch of these guys. Hey. You got to kill them. Why don't you kill them? Makes me think of, I've been looking at documentaries about Rome, Great Colosseum. The day that they finished building this beautiful, magnificent building, I think it was like 500 people were murdered or ripped apart. And the crowds yelled and were excited about it. Pretty bad, isn't it? Could that be Christians? Being excited about somebody else's demise? Wanting somebody else's death? Well, that's what's going on here. Saul, you got to kill those guys. Or maybe women too. Those people that you brought back. No. He says, I'm going to show mercy on them. That did not set well with the Jews. Because those people didn't deserve it. Those are our enemies. And what did Jesus teach? Luke chapter 6. Yeah, be nice to all the Christians. Be nice to all your nice neighbors. I know they're not really Christians. They're just good religious people. Be nice to those people. But, that person down the street, that vagrant, that awful person that's been, married at least 5 times, maybe even more. I think there's a lady in the Bible that's known for that, right? And the person they're now married to, they're not supposed to be married to. Yeah, you married them, in fact. You're just living with them. Oh, no, I'm not going to show any kindness for that. That person's not interested in the gospel. This person doesn't want Christ. I mean, look at their life shows that they would never have room for God. You know how many people have come to God because someone showed them kindness that they didn't deserve? It's amazing. Churches today that believe the gospel is not powerful enough in our society because people are so self-centered and wicked, and you can't convert people. That's because we sit in this little building and we brag about our righteousness and that we stand for truth, but we're not living half of it in the world. God's truth says you be nice to people who don't deserve it. And the reason you're doing it is not because you think they're great people. You're doing it because that's what your master has asked you to do. He doesn't say be nice to somebody that doesn't deserve it, because then they'll give you $1 million for it. Just wait, be patient enough. See, then it becomes about me, isn't it? I'm going to be nice because something I'm going to get. It has nothing to do with me. And any problem that you're having, pull yourself out of that problem and say, the result isn't about you. The result is about Jesus. Thank you so much. I'm yelling at you. I better stop. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope the lesson has been helpful to you. I've got a lot of homework to do myself. This lesson was for me. The last 3 lessons that you've heard from me in this pulpit have been me. The ones about emptying the cup and filling the cup and the Holy Spirit, the relationship with the Holy Spirit. I had to restudy that and rethink myself, and this is another one. I have had so many lessons on humility in my life. I mean, oodles and oodles and oodles. Nothing concrete, nothing practical, nothing that, okay, give me something to take home. Step on my toes, because we're convinced we're humble people, right? We just know the truth, and we're the only ones who know the truth, but we're humble people. Let's be honest. Knowledge, God even says that. What does knowledge do? Knowledge puffs up. That's a lesson all of itself. I didn't even touch on that one. So let's be people who not have just knowledge, but let's be people who practice the knowledge that we know. Thank you so much. If you're here today and not a Christian, I pray that you will become a Christian and you'll be the people that God wants you to be. Please come while we stand and sing the song of invitation.